local election headquarters, this is a special edition of Newsfeed Now, Campaign Trail Today.
This was a way of spending on things that had nothing to do with COVID, as per your question. But it was really a big bailout for badly run Democrat cities and states.
All right,
If I get elected, I'm running as a proud Democrat, but I'm going to be an American president. I don't see red states and blue states. What I see is American, United States.
The COVID-19 pandemic remains the biggest talker this election season. President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden shared the debate stage for the last time before the November 3rd election. If you missed it, we have everything you need to know right here on Newsfeed Now. Glad to have you with us. I'm Suzanne Bruner. We are now 11 days away from Election Day. Early voting numbers are coming in strong with more than 40 million people casting their vote. Our panelists will join us here in just a few minutes to talk about last night's final debate and what that means for the race to the White House. But first, let's take a look at some headlines happening on the campaign trail right now. President Trump will be in Florida today where he plans to vote. He has rallies planned at the Villages and in Pensacola. President Trump will spend the night at his Mar-a-Lago estate, and he says he will vote tomorrow before going to more rallies. Meanwhile, Joe Biden arrived back in Delaware overnight. He and his wife Jill, they're both scheduled to appear at a campaign event about COVID and the economy. This is going to happen in Wilmington. His running mate, Kamala Harris, will be in the Atlanta area, and there she will be attending some early voting events. But now let's get back to last night's debate. It was much calmer with fewer interruptions and more discussion of the issues compared to the first debate that many of you saw in Cleveland. I'd like to bring in our panelists to talk more about what we saw on the debate stage. We have Dave Price, a political reporter from Des Moines, joining us. We also have Kelly Myers weighing in from our D.C. bureau and Chris Bungard from Nashville. Great to have you guys with us. Thanks so much. You know, both candidates touched on the COVID-19 pandemic. They talked about American families, race in America, climate change, and national security, among others. We have a few Newsfeed Now polls out right now, and people have been weighing in. So this first one, who won last night's debate? A majority of people who weighed in said Biden won. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Dave, let's start with you.
Yeah, that's probably not surprising. The debates have not particularly in a general election setting been the president's strong suit. He clearly had a different approach this time around that he did that first one. He was far more aggressive in that first one, and that's why they had the threat of the mute button for this one. So he was far more restrained throughout this debate. The question will be, does this debate, big picture, really make any difference? There are very few undecided people. If you start looking at the polls, just such a small sliver of persuadables, perhaps, at this point. So did the president do any lasting damage to Joe Biden? Or was this something that'll just largely focus on the fact that the president can show a more restrained approach? But does it really change any minds this late into the campaign?
Yeah, Dave, you bring up a good point there. Does this make a big difference? Can we bring up that poll once again? I'd like for folks to take a look at it. Again, the people who weighed in on this, 90% said Joe Biden, 10% Donald Trump. Kelly or Chris, would you like to weigh in on this as well?
Yeah, I would just add on top of what Dave said there. I think also because so many votes have already been cast at this point. I think they broke a record yesterday for the amount of people that have come out for early voting. So I think Dave makes a great point. You know, how many people were really swayed by this last debate? How many people watching really were undecided? You know, I feel like people who say Biden won may be already on Biden's team. People who say Trump won last night already are on the Trump team. But I do think it did do a great job of focusing in on the issues, getting a sense of where the candidates stand right before people do head to the polls, if they do so on November 3rd in person.
Okay, and let's take another look at this poll right here. We asked another question. Did this final debate change who you will vote for in the presidential election? As you can see right here, 13% said yes, 87% said no. So Dave, as you just mentioned, you know, that right there kind of answers your question, but it seems like many have already made up their minds with, and we know that more than 40 million people have already voted. I guess, what do you guys take away from these results?
I just don't think they're that surprising. I always wonder with debates, while they're super important, and candidates should have to stand there and answer questions. Hopefully there are the questions and the issues that Americans are wanting answered. But I always wonder with these things, if you're sort of loosely following politics, loosely following the campaigns, are you really tuned into this stuff to begin with? Or perhaps what really maybe matters more would be the news coverage of these debates. So those moments, and what are your circle of influencers in your life saying about this? What are they saying on social media? What are they saying in the office? What is your spouse saying? Those kind of things. So maybe the reaction to the debates could have the more lasting impact on people than those who actually sat there for 95 minutes or so and watched this thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. You know, the conversations you have with the people around you. Chris, I want to hear your take on this and what Tennesseans are having to say about this. How many people have cast early votes in your state? Unfortunately, I think we're having some issues with Chris's mic right now. Do you think we can? I think we're working on that right now. All right, you got it. All right, Kelly, we'll have
I'm
Kelly.
back.
Oh, he's back. Okay.
Okay, we left.
Who put on the mute button here?
Yeah, who put on the mute button is the question.
All right, Chris.
Sorry about that.
It's all good.
You asked me about Tennesseans, and 1.2 million Tennesseans have voted, and that's rapidly approaching about a third of the electorate so far. So, you know, and we're a very red state here, with two very blue cities being Memphis and Nashville, obviously. But you know, my takeaway from the debate was very similar to the other reporters you've talked to. Let me echo some of their thoughts. It was a debate, and instead of an 8th grade locker room shouting match between a couple of people that we've had before. But I think, and I think people saw some distinctions between the candidates on the major issues of the day, which is handling of COVID-19, and also the unemployment, which is really for those very tiny sliver of people who are left undecided out there. Those are the issues. Am I going to get some more unemployment help or a stimulus check? Am I going to get sick during this pandemic? Those are the issues that everybody on the street and in any community across this country, that's what they're looking for answers for. They're looking for leadership on that. And they saw two people last night for 95, 96 minutes. And maybe it swayed a few of that 2 to 4%. That's what I'm hearing that's undecided out there. And we'll see. I am astonished at that number, 90% on that Biden won the debate on your poll.
Yeah, that's the Newsfeed Now poll that's out.
I think our poll here in Nashville, which is interesting, and keep in mind it's Nashville, which is, you know, is blue. The area around it is red, the suburbs. You know, ours in the area that we cover was about 56-43, I think, something like that, 56-44 to add up to 100. Biden, which kind of surprised me. So those are some takeaways from Tennessee here.
Okay. Kelly?
I was just nodding along with that. And I think, just to contradict myself, even what I was saying earlier, I do think that the debates, even though we were just saying, you know, most of the people that watch these are already decided, I think they are important, though, because I think there could be a stance that one of them takes on an issue that really can kind of pull people back in and say, wait, maybe I don't want to vote for them because of that issue. I think they are very important up till the very last minute before people head to the polls to maybe change their minds. I know there were some things on climate change and former Vice President Biden's stance on oil and fracking that may really stand out to people in some rural areas, in some very important states. My home state of Pennsylvania, you know, people are still very, very split. I was just back there recently, and there's signs for Trump on one side of the duplex and signs for Biden on the other side. So it's still very vital. I do still think this was something that was very important for people to hear.
I think it really is, too. We actually just showed video when Chris was talking just outside of Belmont last night. If we can pull that up once again, people are really just expressing their voice during this election season. This is outside where the debate happened. So a lot of people for Biden out there, against, and also for President Trump and against as well. So they're just showcasing their voices there. But I want to get into some issues that they talked about. So the COVID-19 pandemic pandemic, obviously at the forefront. In the last 7 days, the CDC reports nearly 418,000 new coronavirus cases in the U.S. But take a listen to see how President Trump and Joe Biden responded to those numbers.
And there are some spikes and surges in other places. They will soon be gone. We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks, and it's going to be delivered.
We're about to go into a dark winter, and he has no clear plan, and there's no prospect that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year.
President Trump, your reaction, he says you have no plan.
I don't think we're going to have a dark winter at all. We're opening up our country.
As you just heard, President Trump maintains a vaccine is coming, but Biden says there's no prospect that one will be available. Dave, did Americans get a clear answer from both on how we will beat the virus?
Well, I don't know that if you really want really clear answers, those may not exist. But I think in those answers from the candidates, you hear the themes. It's a much more somber theme that Vice President Biden is sharing here, warning people, hey, the winter's going to be bad here. And they have pointed out, wait till the seasonal flu jumps into this too, that on top of COVID. And the idea, I'm talking from Iowa, where this week we were getting a taste of what winter can bring us here as our temperatures have really plummeted and we have snow already in the forecast. So people are already thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to be inside a lot more. And that's going to probably see these numbers go up. And this week, Iowa has set records with the amount of people in the hospital, the number of people who are reported dead. So the situation is not getting better in this state. The president has tried to share that optimistic tone, and he's done this for months and months as he's tried to downplay the virus here and talked about that the vaccine is right around the corner. The vaccine is not going to be here like he has hoped before Election Day. So I think you really see those two themes on display during that debate tonight. You look at those polls, and the virus is not one of the strong suits and one of the strengths for the president.
Kelly, we do know there's been a lot of back and forth in Washington over a stimulus deal to help people taking a hit from this pandemic. Where are we at right now?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I think we're still digging into, will they get a deal? Will they get some relief to people before Election Day? And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi set this deadline that if they didn't get it done by this past Tuesday, they weren't going to get it done before the election. But then that extended. They're still trying to work on some sort of deal. The White House or Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin has been up here talking with her, Mark Meadows as well. But whether or not that will come out, we still wait to see. Some members of the Senate, some Republican members, they say they're for it, but it depends on the number or depends on who it goes to, who sees that aid. I just talked with South Carolina Senator Republican Lindsey Graham yesterday. He says he's ready to send out the checks. He wants to get something done, and he says he's willing to stay next week beyond, of course, we have the Supreme Court vote happening on Monday. They say they're willing to stay, but they only have at that point then one more week to go before their own election. He's up for election. He's on the ballot. So whether or not people are going to see some relief, it just gets more and more unlikely the closer we get to Election Day.
Well, this does transition into their discussion on the stage about health care. Here's what both candidates said about Obamacare.
What I would like to do is a much better health care, much better, will always protect people with pre-existing. So I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care. The Democrats will do it because there'll be tremendous pressure on them, and we might even have the House by that time.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option. It'll become Biden care. The public option is an option that says that if you, in fact, do not have the wherewithal if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled.
Your takes right there. The Affordable Care Act is a key case heading to the Supreme Court next month. This is what we know, and this has been a big concern for Democrats who we just saw yesterday, Kelly. They did not take part in the vote to send Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the full Senate. So I guess what are some of the key differences that both candidates are proposing for health care, and what can we expect to happen next?
President Trump says that he has his Trump Care plan. He announced it a couple weeks ago. Democrats criticized that, saying it was just government propaganda. There was nothing inside of it. It was interesting. Last night, Biden had proposed, he said Biden Care. He says he's going to kind of separate a little bit from Obamacare and keep those protections in place, though. You know, Trump says he got rid of the individual mandate, but he says he's going to keep pre-existing conditions. Again, that the Affordable Care Act is up on the docket in the Supreme Court the week after the election. They are looking to break down the Affordable Care Act. Whether they can keep pre-existing conditions with taking away the ACA, that's a question I proposed to many members of the administration and haven't really gotten a straight answer on how they plan to keep protections for people with pre-existing conditions without the framework of the Affordable Care Act. So that is a big factor, I think, going into Election Day. That's something that Democrats are very strongly campaigning on as they get closer. And like you mentioned, something they're talking about here on Capitol Hill and why they did not show up for the vote out of the committee on Judge Barrett yesterday. And
we know healthcare is a very important topic for a lot of Americans. But Chris, in Tennessee, this is a huge concern for voters.
Oh, of course, and Republicans know that health care has not exactly been a winner for them. They've been very critical, obviously, over the years of Obamacare and wanting to repeal and replace it. But as you've been talking about, it's never been clear what will replace it. And it's a scary thing for a lot of voters out there who are on this program. And there are many people, I know people, you probably know people, who've been on Obamacare. And imagine if you have a car wreck going home tonight, you know, all of a sudden, you know, if Obamacare was gone, there's going to be that interim period between what may replace it. You know, people are going to be confused. So they say, well, maybe I just, you know, I'm not completely sold on this program. My premiums have been very high, but I know it's there. I don't know what will replace it. And so that has not been a great issue for Republicans. And it's one thing that I would imagine the president will be hammering on, you know, going forward, saying, yes, we will have a plan. And he might even get more specific, but, you know, don't hold your breath on that.
All right. You know, the candidates also shared their plans for the oil industry. Let's take a listen to what they had to say about that.
Would you close down the oil industry?
By the way, I would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I would
that's
transition.
a big statement.
It is a big statement.
That's a
because
big statement.
I would stop.
Why would you do that?
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly.
I see.
Here's the deal. But
That's
you
a
can't
big
do
statement.
that. Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy over time. And I'd stop giving to the oil industry, I'd stop giving them federal subsidies. He won't give federal subsidies to the gas, excuse me, to solar and wind.
Yeah.
Why are we giving it to oil industry?
We actually do give it to solar and wind.
We
And
have
that's
one
maybe the
final
biggest
question.
statement in terms of business. That's the biggest statement.
Okay.
Because
We have
basically
one
what he's
final
saying
question,
is he is
Mr.
going to
President.
destroy the oil industry.
Quite the debate here. I mean, no matter how you look at it, you know, even job loss or creation, that was something that came up. And I think that got people to thinking. But Dave, I want to get your thoughts on how that all unfolded on the stage.
That was a moment last night.
Yeah.
And if you tuned away right before the last few minutes of the debate, you totally missed that. I think going forward here, Kelly mentioned that she's from Pennsylvania, that will be an issue in Pennsylvania. You know, Texas is an area that Democrats had been increasingly optimistic about their chances are. I'm not saying that statement alone from the former vice president will tank his efforts in all of these states. But I would think that exchange right there will force Biden now in the days ahead to really drill down in there and explain what he means to make sure that he is expressing a message of, hey, I don't mean tomorrow oil's going to be gone and you're going to have to use an electric car and we're going to ban gas-powered cars. But it seems like that is now a challenge that perhaps he wasn't expecting that he was going to have to explain, which is challenging for him because he's not doing a lot of events. So he will face a lot of questions, and the president will probably really try to hammer him on that, even though Biden's probably talking about, hey, long term here, this is what I want to do. But the way it came out last night will maybe require him to do some more explaining.
I was going to say, yeah, because when you watched it, President Trump immediately jumped to his reaction and he had to do a little backtrack and explain what he meant. But I really want to pull up the continuation of this, of that portion of that debate. Let's hear Biden's response on that.
Well, eventually we're going to have to go to all, but we're not going to get rid of fossil fuels. We're going to get rid of the subsidies for fossil fuels. but we're not going to be rid of fossil fuels for a long time. It will not be gone for probably 2050.
You're saying that basically millions of people in those industries are going to lose their jobs.
No, they're not going to lose their jobs, and besides, a lot more jobs are going to be created in other alternatives. So thank you.
All right. Hey, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got to get going, so if you have any last things that you want to say, please feel free to do so, or just jump off the call if you need to. We appreciate your time.
Well, it's interesting hearing all this. And of course, I heard some other pundits last night after the debate talking about this energy issue, that it could ultimately be something that you're going to see ads about, with for fracking, against it. Is it going to get rid of fossil fuels? You know, I think if you're inclined to see things along the lines of the way Donald Trump does, you're going to see a lot of ads here. You know, the dark winter that's forecast by Joe Biden. It's a much more sunnier outlook from the president. Going to get rid of your gas and cars and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, you could just, I swear you're going to see these kind of ads going forward. And if we think we're tired of them now, well, you know, another 10 more days and we're going to be ready for this election to be over, but it may not be over at that point. That's probably a topic for another time.
All right. Thanks so much. Okay. So, you know, watching the debates, the town halls, I think there's been a common theme that people have been talking about. It's the moderators. And this time around, Kristen Welker, she did moderate last night's debate. She even received some praise online during and afterwards. Dave and Kelly, what are your thoughts on her performance?
I think it's largely universal praise, right? I feel like we been carefully on this, but I mean, if at my station, for example, we had one this week, so that's the third debate that I moderated this cycle. And obviously standing there, it's very challenging to try to figure out, how do you press for answers? How do you give them time? But how do you make sure that things don't veer off course here into the train wreck like we saw in that first presidential debate? But she clearly knows her stuff. And maybe it was that threat of the mute button that kept people in line, so they didn't nearly jump and trip all over each other and interrupt right and left like that first one was. And it was a far more substantive debate. And if you were really, as a viewer, I think, trying to learn stuff, you actually learned stuff last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was just tweeting out, congrats to the debate commission for handling that mute button and making sure that it went smoothly off and on of each candidate all night long. So kudos to them. But yeah, also kudos to Kristen Welker. She did an incredible job and, you know, handled it very professionally and, you know, making sure each time it was clear, you know, you get 2 minutes without interruption and then, okay, I'll let you respond, and then kind of wrapping it up saying, we're going to move on to the next topic. You know, let's move it on here. Let's keep it going. But I also do think both candidates knew going into this that they even seemed a bit more respectful of the situation. I think they both knew how the first debate went and how it was portrayed. You had lawmakers up here on Capitol Hill on both sides saying it was a disaster. So they didn't want that to happen again either, because I don't think it looked good for either side. So it even seemed as though they were a bit more respectful of the time and the moderator in this debate than previously.
Yeah, good point.
And may I say one more thing, since we brought up the Mr. Mute. I discovered this morning with some deft reporting that I actually know the person who was finger was on the mute button.
Really?
The person lives here in Nashville. I'm not going to say any more because
Who is it? No, I'm kidding.
No, I'm not going to say. And my first response was, oh my goodness. Well, I've identified gender, but that's about as far as I'm going to go. You know, we got to get to him. We got to talk to him and what the experience was like. History making. You're muting people running for the United States presidency, that sort of thing. And I just got a big fat no.
Oh, come on.
That is great.
Like I said, it's a very quirky way that I found out, and just in conversations with the kind of people that I talk to every day after something like this happens, and somebody says, well, you know, the person on it was da-da-da-da-da-da. And I made, what I'm trying to get to, this person could retire not too long in the future, and he will have a wonderful story to tell. So anyway,
for sure.
I'd throw that out there as a little bit of a light note. I know it's like, oh, gee, who is this person? And no, we can't go there, but that person really exists, and they'll have something to say at some point someday, but by then we may have moved on to other topics and he'll be forgotten. Hopefully
definitely.
not.
I'm glad you stuck around to share that with us. And I promise you, I didn't mute you during this panel discussion. I'm not that mean. All right, guys. So great to have you.
You're
have
not
a great.
The muter.
No, I'm not. I promise. No buttons here. It's back there. All right, guys. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to do this all again on Monday when our election coverage continues here on Newsfeed Now. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.